that decision might be. You know, do you feel, is there any way that if you went into a trial, you feel that there would be a certain guarantee that you would win?
No.
I think we kind of all go through life like there's not a whole lot of guarantees in life, right? Now, that's without going into the day in the life of the trial. If you wanted to go into more specifics, and if someone wants to ask a question about like that, then we'll kind of demonstrate that. But part of
What Steve did was he took the very first thing that I said, that I want my day in court and I want my $5,000. And he started, and forgetting what the conflict was about, forgetting that I said it's the principle I want, justice. He went to that message and started to peel away at why that $5,000 was not a guarantee, and why that $5,000 upon which I based my principle was not necessarily going to get me where I wanted to go. So when they say it's principle, one of the first things you got to find out is what's the principle. Yes,
and what's it worth?
And then the principle is not money, all that, but it's really about punishing them.
Right.
Taking them through the court procedure.
Right.
It's really making them suffer in that. It doesn't matter how much they're gonna suffer, you go through all that. It's making them get punished in court.
You want me to mediate on that?
Steve, I sense that you have an abiding sense of an injustice that occurred here.
These people wrong me, and frankly, I don't care what it costs. I want them to be dragged through this court system. And you know something? If I lose, that's okay. But I want them to have their time wasted. I want them to spend money. I want them to go through the pain and the aggravation. And that in some way will make me feel better to see that they've suffered because of what they've done to me. So, that's what I want. And I think I can get that if I go to a trial, even if I lose.
What makes you think that the experience that they're going to have and the suffering you think that they will experience in going through that process is unique to them? Do you think that some of that might also occur with you?
Well, what do you mean? I mean, they're going to have to go to trial and they're going to have to defend what I'm going to say, and they're not going to be able to do that. I'm telling the truth, and they're going to have to come up and make up some kind of a story, and they're going to have to lie about it, and the jury or the judge just isn't going to believe it.
How are you going to feel about it when you're sitting there listening to what you say is going to be a lie?
Well, I've had to listen to it for years, and I got to tell you, every time I think about it, it just drives me nuts, and that's one of the reasons why I want to go to the trial.
If the judge decides that they're not lying, how are you going to feel about that?
Well, how could he do that? It should be obvious to him what I'm saying is what actually happened. How could a judge possibly not believe me?
What might the judge not believe about their testimony? What makes you so certain?
Well, I'm going to tell my story, and they're going to tell their story. And I think if the judge listens to what they say and listens to what I say, he's going to believe what I say and not what they say.
What would be some reasons why the judge might believe them more than you might believe you?
You're asking me to say why I might lose? Is that what you're saying? Well, I suppose if I said something wrong in giving my testimony, telling my story.
Think you might be a little nervous when you're there talking to the judge?
Well, I'm nervous talking to you.
Okay. So, other people going to be in the courtroom besides you?
I would imagine when you see the stuff on TV, the whole courtrooms are full of people. There might even be photographers there.
Do you have a lot of experience in doing public speaking?
I hate standing in front of a group and talking.
So you're nervous here.
Am I going to have to stand up? Can't I just talk to the judge in his office about this, and he can then make a decision?
Well, when you watch TV, where do they talk to the judge usually?
Well, I see the people on this witness stand, but I also see the lawyers, talking to the judge in his room. Can't they just do that there?
Are you going to have a lawyer?
Do I need one, you think?
So So again, you're meeting people where they are, peeling the onion, and going, in a way, you are being directive. Because you have a focus, you want to move them beyond this principle that's driving their justification. But you have to create permission for them to give up the principle. And so, and you have to create an opportunity for them to save face in the place of the principle. And so often when people say it's the principle of things, I sometimes take that as a cue for why I might want to caucus. Because I've got to now figure out how to move them beyond principle. At the same time, I'm creating risk and doubt, but I've also got to create value and saving face. And if you can figure out ways to do that and work them through this process and help them see that they're making now a somewhat more rational decision because the wheelbarrow of money is sitting on the table and they can't buy an insurance policy for this lawsuit to get their result. Now you've given them some rational reason that they can replace for the principle, and they can let the principle go because they found a greater value, a greater rationalization for the decision to move away from.
Would you do this in caucus or in general session? Question?
Would the same strategy work if it's the defendant who says, she brought me to court or he brought me to court, and I don't want to settle this, I want to see it through? So with what you two just did, would that work? I'm assuming you were the plaintiff in this.
Right, in our example.
Yeah.
Well, you want to do the defense?
Sure. Steve, you know what? I've got a real anger about this. Brought me to court, you know, I had to take time off to answer this thing, I had to go to the court, I got lost, and, you know, gonna have to hire a lawyer, and, you know, frankly, we didn't do anything wrong, so I am really PO'd. And frankly, I just soon go to the system and put them through that. Let them process what they think they're gonna get. They're not gonna get it, but let them process it.
Have you ever had this kind of experience before?
Never been sued ever.
So this is the first time. This is kind of a shock.
Yeah, and I'm incensed. I mean, I was,
Could you make it so that you have had that experience?
okay.
And you know the whole thing, you know,
Okay.
you don't care about time, you don't care about money, it
Yeah.
truly
You
is
know,
your
I'm
With
a
a lawyer or without a lawyer? With a lawyer?
Okay, let's say I'm a home builder and I've been sued for you know, build a bad house. Say I build a bad house. Steve, you know what? We build houses all the time. Homeowners sue us all the time. You know, that's why we've got insurance. That's why I got this great insurance lawyer here. You know, we got policies. And you know what? We don't pay on every case. There's a floodgate problem. And if I had to pay on every single homeowner who had potholes in their wall, I'd be out of business.
So your concern, in part, is that if you settle this case with this person, you change the facts on me. If you know you did it, don't you?
Yeah.
Change the emphasis, the direction. So what your concern is that if you settle this particular case, it might give the opportunity or give the impression to others that you're a soft touch? Is that
Yeah,
frankly
and
stated?
plus, you know, this woman's a pain in the, you know, she was a pain from the get-go. And frankly, she ought to suffer some of this pain that she's put us through. I mean, we've been over backwards to make this woman.
Tell me a little bit about your, your business. I know that, we shared some of that in your opening statement. How long has your company been in business?
15 years.
Built a lot of homes. You're primarily residential. I mean, some companies have specialized in certain types of homes or certain types of subdivisions. If you had a ballpark, how many houses have you built?
Couple hundred.
Have any of those ever involved disputes with homeowners?
Yeah, I mean, we'd had them. And you know, and frankly, sometimes, you know, we gotta pay. We screw up, you know? But I mean, this woman she's out to lunch. She is so off base. I don't think we have any liability here.
So in comparison to some of the other situations where you believe that there has been a situation that caused liability, what did you do then? When you saw it as one where, well, we've got some liability, did you decide to defend it, or did you think about resolving it somehow to settle?
Well, some of them we defended and, you know, paid a lot of money and, you know, and we settled. I mean, you know, we settled a lot, but I just really feel that this woman is taking advantage of it.
So if this, let's talk about just for an instance, and I know it's not this case as you see it, but if this were a case that from your prior experience was one of those that had some merit, you would be willing to consider some settlement. what would change the picture with this case in order for this woman to have merit in her position? In other words, what might make it one of those cases that you would be willing to settle? What's
And you would
different?
go that route. I gave him, in that conversation, 4 or 5 areas that he could explore. One was, I think she's taking advantage of us. One was the floodgate. One was, this case versus prior cases. Forgot the fourth one. But when people are venting on principle or venting on their resistance, it's real important to listen. Notice he's not taking notes. He's trying to get to the root of it and find 4 or 5 nuggets that he went down with me. And although I look like I'm standing here he's not having any effect on me, my mind is going, my gut is going, and I've got to now start to reevaluate this. And when he says to me, what would this look like if you were willing to pay something on it? What needs to be there? All of a sudden, I forgot that I was mad at her and forgot that I was feeling an injustice and that I wanted to send a message. I'm back to thinking, I'm on the defensive now.
Back to a business decision. And she gave me 3 or 4 techniques, or 3 or 4 factors. Which one do I approach first? Part of that is just a feel. One that she may have had more emphasis on, one might have seemed more important or less important. And sometimes, when you look at which issue to prioritize and resolve first, should I start with the simple one and then work with the more complex, or deal with the more complex, get that one done, and then it's going to be a downhill or uphill, whatever you want to talk about? I have at least four different angles, separate different angles that I can approach with her. And then I have, however, 4 times each of those permutations as possible alternatives, because there might be combinations of those. So what I have to keep doing is I have to keep asking the questions, keep listening to her, keep acknowledging some of the things that she's talking about, until I finally get a direction or a sense as to which one is going to be the most effective to work with her. She may not respond to, well, I don't think there's anything she can do about this case. There's no way this case could be one that I'd even consider settling. So it's not like the others. So then you go in another direction. You're the head of this company, and have you found yourself having to come to these other situations yourself personally?
Well, this one I'm gonna have to, because I did the general contract with her. But other ones, sometimes we send the project manager.
Okay. So your company has been in litigation before. Will this be the first time that you will have to sit at the table and testify?
No.
You've done it before. What do you do normally in the course of the day if you didn't have to be in court doing this?
Oh, man, I'm on the phone, I'm out at sites,
You're the deal maker and also
Yeah.
the manager of the projects? Who does that? Who will do that in your absence while you're in trial of this case pursuing your interest?
Well, I'll be working with them. I mean, again, one of the things that happens with mediators is you get a sounds good answer and you accept it. And he's not letting me do that. He's making me go right down into minutia, detail. When we say that mediators need to be patient and persistent, we're talking about digging deep, and just keep going and going and going and going. Because eventually the wheels will begin to turn in the mind of the resistor. And you will be able to find, as Steve said, some avenues to hit that will move them into a zone that makes them, again, more readily receivable of solutions. And again, creating permission in my own mind for recanting the positional posture that I had going into this conversation, saving face with me. And we have a rule that we use when we teach, and it's the 80% rule. And that is that 80% of what comes out of the mediator's mouth should end with a question mark. Asking questions is a much higher skill than making pronouncements. And so as mediators, one of the things you want to think about when you get to a point where someone says it's principle or they can get stuck, the first thing you want to ask yourself is, where do I want to go? What do I want to know at this point? How can I ask it in the form of a question? And how can I ask it with the least amount of words? And if you stop yourself when you're getting this principle thing and sort of self-explore, like, why is this upsetting me? Why am I nervous about the fact they're getting stuck on principle? And and what am I gonna do about that? And you sort of have that conversation with yourself so you can get past it. And then set out, okay, what do I wanna know next? How can I ask it as a question with the fewest words? It anchors you and it gets you over that fear, that insecurity that you're not doing it right, that you're not being effective, that you're getting frustrated. And it gives you a go-to place. One of the things that we teach in advanced mediation is, what's your go-to place? When all else fails, where do you go? What do you do? You know, and one of my go-to places is I just say, okay, what do I want to know? How can I ask it in a question? What's the fewest number of words I can get? And again, like lawyers in depositions, and Steve's great at this example. For those of you that are lawyers, you go to a deposition, and you ask the witness a question, and they answer. And then you wait. And what happens? They just talk. Same thing as a mediator. Sometimes when you get to those points where you're feeling, I'm not being successful, I'm not making the impact that I want to make, they're stuck on principle. One of the things you do is you just settle yourself down. It isn't about you. Let's get anchored, let's go to our go-to place, and then let's come back out with another technique, another avenue.
Let's, if it's okay, we'll spin off two other techniques off of this scenario. Sorry, with you.
Could you do floodgate too, as part of this?
Well, the floodgate, I'm worried about a floodgate if I settle
Yeah,
across
yeah,
it.
yeah.
Let's do that I'm gonna win.
Okay.
And now
What did you say?
I'm going to win, and I'm gonna talk to the lawyer and bring him involved with it, because the lawyer knows there's no guarantee to win. No guarantee. Okay, so now I'm talking to the lawyer. Ms. Allen, I certainly sense from your client that he is an experienced builder, he's had litigation before, and he's very, very convinced he's going to win the case. Can you give me a sense of how long you think this trial is going to take? Well, first of all, is there a trial date?
It's trial date about 6 months out, which is fine with us, because then the plaintiff can, we can just keep the money longer even if we lose.
Now, your client's here, and this is something that he's obviously concerned with. Can you give me an idea of what has been spent, and legally spent so far to date?
Well, I don't know, what do we build you, Joe? About maybe 12,000 probably.
And what needs to be done between now and the time of trial during that 6 months? Is everything done, or do you have to do more preparation?
We gotta get our expert back and do the analysis. We took the expert's deposition, but we gotta get the report done.
Has the expert, is there a fee? The expert is charging a fee?
Oh, yeah.
Has that fee been paid yet? I mean,
Yeah, Joe's paid, I don't know, what you paid, Joe? 5,000 so far, and, so I hate to tell you, it's probably another 5, plus trial. He's gotta come to trial, so, it's a 2-day trial, so he's $250 an hour, so he takes 50, I don't know, another 2,000 maybe.
Okay, so before you even walk into the courthouse steps to try your case, your investment on this is going to be about $24,000. And how much is in controversy here? It's $5,000. So it's a $5,000 case.
Or it's a $50,000 case. I mean, it could even be a $50,000.
Okay, it's a $50,000 case. So you're going to spend $24,000 to get $25,000. Let me see if my math is right. I'm not always this good about this. Correct me if I'm wrong. But your net, if you win, is going to be $26,000 for your client. And Mr. Smith was telling me that he has these. He says these 3 deals that are really important for him at this point, and he has to be personally involved in them over these next 3 months. What kind of availability are you going to need for him over these next 6 months?
Well, I mean, he's gonna have to sit with the expert. We gotta go through that, and I gotta prep him, so there's a couple days.
Mr. Smith, how does that sit with you? You're going to need to be available for that time. Your lawyers indicated that. How do you feel about that?
And you're walking them through the reality, tying it to
This is just an expense component.
Yeah. Tying it to the floodgate. He could then say to me, so let me see if I understand. You're worried about more lawsuits from these people in the subdivision, and you're willing to go to bat and risk a $26,000 possible benefit to send a message? What's the likelihood that you're gonna win?
Okay. Yep. You want to ask me?
Yeah.
You'll be the mediator.
Yeah. Steve, you know, if you tried this case 100 times, you're gonna win it how many times?
Well, 55% maybe.
Okay, so 26,000 times 55%.
You do the math. I just know.
Let's say it's 13.5, I don't know what it is, okay. 13.5.
Well, what if they tell you, oh, I'm gonna win it 90% of the time? 'Cause
A
they really
lawyer,
feel it.
because you know, if a lawyer says that, I'll say to the lawyer, you gonna guarantee that to your client in front of the client?
Really, in front of the client?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Another example that I've used in sophisticated cases, and I've done it in joint session, and I've done it in caucus, and I've said this. You know what troubles me about litigation? You know how when you have a golf tournament, and you can buy insurance for the guy hitting the hole-in-one to pay for the car that he's gonna win when he gets the home? Oh, yeah. And you know how if the kid's school's gonna have a fair, you can buy insurance if it rains to cover the cost of it? Oh, yeah. Anybody offer to sell you insurance on this lawsuit? Why do you think that is? It's very powerful because it brings home, if you can use metaphors and analogies to bring home points that you're trying to make, that's another very effective technique to use with people in conflict.
Now, let's turn it around and let's say that you've got two parties who are both saying that they're gamblers and that they're willing to roll the dice.
Yeah, let's say that let's say in our construction case, the plaintiff is asking for $35,000. Defendant's willing to put in
Who is
20.
the counterpoint?
20.
Complaint and countercomplaint.
Okay, this is the complaint. Defendant's willing to pay 20, but on the counterclaim, because let's say the plaintiff hasn't paid all up, let's say he's owed 10 on this. And they've offered 0 on the counterclaim. So let's assume that's where you are.
Okay. And what I've decided to do is the lawyers have gotten frustrated with their clients because they can't talk to them. These guys are not willing to listen to legal advice. They're really frustrated. So I've taken the lawyers out in the hall and I said, look, how would you feel if, would you give me the opportunity to speak just with your clients? And I promise I'm not going to try to convince them to do anything. There won't be any agreements about anything until they come out and consult with you first and to make sure everything is okay. How does that work? At this point, they're saying, fine, do anything you possibly can. We can't do anything with these people. So I bring them in, and I say, well, Miss Allen and Mr. Smith, this is such a unique situation for me. I don't know if I've ever seen one before. The two of you were really good friends. You've built projects together. You told me that you took vacations and used to go to Las Vegas together. It sounds like you like gambling.
Oh, yeah,
And Mr. Smith, you like gambling too.
Oh, yeah.
And both of you you actually use the same expression when I talk to you in caucus, and I don't think I'm giving away any confidence here, but you kind of both use the expression, well, I'm willing to roll the dice on this case. So, well, let me ask you something. If we could construct a game for you, in which the outcome was purely by chance, and you were willing to take the gamble here in the mediation that you're willing to take in court, how about that? What do you think? You guys are smiling at each other, but you're both nodding your heads, so I'll tell you what. Here's the game. I have a quarter in my pocket, okay? And what I will do is, you pick heads or you pick tails, you tell me what you're going to do right now. I'll flip the quarter in the air, I'll let it drop on the table, and whichever side it is, that's the party that wins, and they get everything. How do you feel about that?
Well, I don't know if I'm willing to walk
That's
that
not
way.
what you're supposed to say.
I know, what I'm supposed to say is yes, because in this case, that's what they did. But let's assume, the point is.
Let me finish with the damn case.
All right.
Just to show you the extreme sometimes that you do meet with people, that they are entirely gamblers, and they get into the game. They're not willing to give up principle and relinquish to the other side, but they're willing to give things to chance. They're willing to go to trial and leave it to the chance of the trial judge or the jury. And so you're going to use that motivation, construct a game for them that is entirely out of chance. And they're both willing to say yes. And I said, well, before you guys be willing to do this, go talk to your lawyers. Or let's bring them in to see if this is okay. And the lawyers, again, they don't care. They just want to done with the case, whatever their clients want to do. So the clients say yes. I flipped the court. This happened 3 weeks ago. I flipped the court. I took advantage of what they wanted to do. Flipped the quarter in the air, dropped it on the table. It was heads. One guy got everything. The other guy got nothing. They looked at each other, smiled, shook their hand. So that's the deal. And I said, okay, let's write it down.
And it was what, a $20,000, $30,000?
Yeah, it was a $30,000.
They gave away 30 grand. Oh, yeah, flip of a coin.
Okay, so that
But
was.
if they were satisfied, that's fully why.
Guess they own it.
Since mediation is not legally binding.
They formed a contract.
They did form a
They formed a
already.
contract by their agreement. They set the stipulation, the criteria for how they would resolve this dispute. They decided that they would subject the decision to an arbitrary action, an arbitrary event, without any standards whatsoever. The arbitrary event was the flip of a coin.
But you were using that just as kind of a pretense for a vehicle to move them somewhere,
No,
right?
No, that's
no.
what, so, okay.
It's that we
It's
kept.
what the
But
client
did you
wanted.
expect that? I mean, that's what you're trying to do?
No, what I saw was two personalities who were willing to gamble under any circumstances. They were willing to gamble with $30,000 to go to trial, regardless of who won. They were willing to gamble, and seeing that, and that's what they wanted to do. They like games.
You got to their deepest need.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they wanted to gamble.
Yeah, you want to gamble.
And they
That
were
was a
willing
game.
to, because they went to Vegas together. They would sit at the crap table together. They would see each of them lose $30,000, $40,000, $50,000. I learned all this information. So they didn't care about the money. They just didn't want to agree with the other guy. But they'd be willing to subject it to something that they both had an experience with and that they enjoyed. It was fun for them.
It's a great example of never really knowing what parties' needs are, how strange and different they might be.
Right.
And if you get to that, you got it.
It's the first time I've ever done that. But it was the same thing that you do when you see that parties are committed to certain things. You don't try to fight that energy. You try to figure out how you can convert it into something that's meaningful for them. So if they want to go in a certain direction, remember what a mediation is about? The parties make the decision. I just help construct a set of rules for how they would make their decision.
I think your choice point, what you were saying though, about, it slides back in time, where you were saying to the lawyer, are you gonna guarantee it, kind of thing, in front of the client, okay? And I kind of view one of my big rules in mediation is I try to keep my back away from the wall, so I don't have a place. And I also want to, if I can, get the lawyers that I'm working with them rather than against them, so I don't want to jam them up. And I can do that quite often if you do the pre-work where you're talking to the lawyer, find out where his thinking is. So that is really a choice point, whether you really want to do it in front of the client or you want to do it out.
Let's make it real clear that, and I said this yesterday, Steve and I view the lawyers, in spite of what you've heard from us today, as part of our team to help clients resolve conflict. And my methodology, when I pre-discuss with lawyers before cases, I send that message. I need them on the team. We're going to work to get some resolution for their clients. If I sense that I need to talk to the lawyer in a way that's going to put him at risk with his client, I don't do it without getting his permission. And so I would take the lawyer out and say, look, I'm about to ask you in front of your client, are you going to guarantee a 55% success rate on this case?
Well,
Or a 90% success rate?
of course I can't. When you were practicing, did you ever guarantee a client anything?
That's my point, Steve.
Well, I'll tell you, it might be a way of moving the client just to get them to show that, because he seems to be pretty committed to feeling that, there's no way he's going to lose the case.
He really believes in you. You've done a marvelous job convincing him that he's got a really good likelihood of success.
I may have done too good a job on that, Tracy.
So how can I help you, help him come to
Well,
a different view?
I had a mediation one time where I saw a mediator use I thought it was an effective technique. And what he did was he kind of went through what a day in the life of a trial would be. And another technique he used was to kind of talk about, a good day and a not so good day and a bad day and break it down into percentages. And, I know that if the best I could tell this client, maybe it's 50-50. And I'm not real comfortable with taking a case to trial 50-50. I don't want you telling it to the other side. And you and I are just talking about this, and, you know, as I say, maybe I kind of oversold this to the client. So maybe if we can kind of go through, and I'd be willing to.
Okay, so
stop
if I
talking about
go
that.
in there and I start asking you about scripting what a day in the life looks like, when we start talking about trial costs, you're gonna give me stuff that's positives? I mean, I don't wanna fight with you, but if we're collaborating to try and send the message to client that the risk is more than 50-50, or that at best it's 50-50, am I gonna get your cooperation on that?
Yeah, I will, just don't put me on the spot.
I'm not gonna put you on the spot, but, you know, is it fair to say, well, Steve, in your experience with Justice Goldberg, do you think he's gonna grant that motion? I mean, can we?
Yeah, I can answer that.
And so can you give me some answers that are gonna plant some seeds of
Sure.
doubt with your client?
If they go those kinds of questions, I can do that.
So I'm gonna script it, and I'm gonna get his consensus on it, and I'm also gonna find out what I can do and what I can't do. Because again, he's my client, not his client. I mean, my source of revenue is lawyers and companies, and if I irritate him, and he's in a firm like Holland and Knight, what do you think's going on the company email tonight after he comes home from a mediation? Don't ever use that, you know.
You know what?
Again, and I don't need that. So, you know, I'm really, really respectful of the role and the needs of the lawyers, and I'm always trying to make them my ally, because they know more than I know about the case, and I'm trying to find out from them how we can get to the client, how we can work together to get to the client.
Do you think you'll use that strategy again, where you maybe don't know that these guys are gamblers like that?
No.
As a way to see, to an analogy, this, you're talking about gambling when you go to the trial, but you're not willing to gamble by flipping a coin.
Yeah.
What's the difference?
The contrast is, and here again, you could potentially enroll the lawyer who will say, you know, there's no guarantee of result one way or another. I think I can win the case for you, but there's no guarantee that, of course, there's no guarantee that someone else is making the decision. But gentlemen, you know, if you're not willing to flip a coin, do you think there's any greater likelihood that that's what goes on during a trial? And if they say yes, it's a far more certain process, then you're into reality checking, and you go through, you bring the lawyer in and ask them to talk about percentages and likelihood of success and what it takes to prove the case. Sometimes that's preceded by a managed debate on the law, because the lawyers feel like they have to talk a lot about the law until they get all that out. And sometimes that can be of assistance to the client, because it's a dry run for them to see what the other lawyer's like. Oh, they got a good lawyer too. And he knows what it's going to take to win his case, and I hadn't quite thought about it that way. You do that in front of the client, it can have a fairly dramatic effect.
It's not to say that when you have people that are really, really close. I had a case not too long ago with claims and counterclaims, and they were $5,000 apart on about a $200,000 risk. Now, you know, I don't know how you feel about that, but I would like want to give them the $5,000 and go home. I mean, in the grand scheme of things.
See, she's got it, I don't. I can't make that up.
So, I mean, sometimes when they get really close, you can say that, you guys are really close. What do you think we can do to close this gap? There's no right number at this point. You've created your own range. You've gotten really close. We can't move here. And I put the ownership back on them. What do you think we can do to close it? Sometimes somebody will say, split the baby, flip a coin, you know, put a number in a hat. Number in the hat is another technique that we use. A lot of numbers techniques that you use are not when they're out here. And in fact, what we say to people often in conflict is, plaintiff is here, defendant is here, plaintiff wants $1 million, defendant's offered 0, and you say, look, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut off the extremes of the bell curve. And now, where is the range that we want to work in here? Where do you want to work?
And most often, they're not going to tell you in the general session, but they may be willing to discuss, well, we came with this amount of authority, so we'd be willing to negotiate someplace, this is defense here, you know, we'd be willing to go, you know, in this 2,000, 0 to 2,000, 200,000. Now, that's what we're willing to
Okay,
work.
so you came here today.
You shifted the framework that way a little bit.
So you came here today, Steve, with a couple different things. It's like selling a house. When you put your house on the market, you have an asking price, and that's your aspirational number. So your aspirational number as a defendant was 0. But the expectation when you're selling a house and you put it on the market for $500,000 is it, you know, in today's market, probably gonna have to come off that number.
Well, Tracy, you know, we've worked together on cases, you know, we have to take a certain position when we open up the other side. And, you know, we're going to compromise at some point. I haven't told you where our bottom line is, and frankly, I'm not sure I know where it is. But, you know, in making this, I think this is a significant move, and we're willing to move here. I'm not saying how much further beyond that we're willing to go, but, you know, this is a place we're willing to negotiate.
Okay, so your aspiration was 0, but you have, if I'm reading you, an expectation.
Oh, I knew we'd have to move. We must
Okay.
compromise. We want to settle the case. We're going to have to offer
Okay.
something.
All right. So at this point in time, your expectation range is something up to 200.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you can go get them, go tell them that if they want to negotiate, but I don't tell them 200,000.
Let's talk about their aspirational side. They came in with an aspiration of $1 million. If you were Chris Hurley, where do you think his expectation number was?
Oh, he's at 1 million.
That's his aspiration, but he knows he's not going to get it.
Well,
So,
maybe $100,000 less.
Okay. So his expectation number is some range of around 900. Right? Okay. Now let's talk about realities.
Well, you want to take a second one. Are you willing to negotiate between 200 and 900?
No, we're not going to do that yet. Let's
Sorry,
talk
it's
about.
a little above the bubble we were talking.
Let's talk about reality. What do you think the likelihood is that he's going to go from here to there?
Oh, I'm dreaming. I know him. I've tried cases with him. You know, he's willing to go to the mat if he doesn't think he's going to get the amount he wants.
If I go in there and ask him and I draw the same picture for him and I say, what's the likelihood that Steve's going to go from here to here, what do you think he's going to say?
Oh, he knows. We try cases before we go beyond a certain
Okay,
point.
so he knows you're not going to go here and you know he's not.
Fine, absolutely.
All right, so we got a range, but it isn't the right one.
Right.
And he's already sent me a signal. 200's what he told me. I know there's more money. You don't ever believe what they tell you. I mean, people under this notion that people tell the truth in mediation, let's get real. They never, I mean, you never know the truth. And what do they say about the truth? There's the story. There's nothing truer than the truth except the story. So already I know, and I've already planted the seed with him, that there's no way today that this case is going to settle for 200. And I would do the same thing in the other room, and he knows no way this case is going to settle for 900. The client has heard this discourse, and now you've got the expectations that they came with and the aspirations, and you've shrunk them. And you've created momentum, and you've created movement. And now you've focused them on getting to an area where they can have productive conversations to begin to close the gap.
And sometimes you're not really concerned with the numbers, are you?
Yeah, I
You
don't
just want
care.
to see movement, to begin to build momentum and perhaps confidence that the process will work.
Have you ever had a lawyer, I actually had this happen to me once. Have you ever had a lawyer say, you know what, I was using this exact technique, and the lawyer looked at me and said, you know what, you're trying to get me to bargain against myself.
Great technique, bargaining against myself. Steve, you know what? 900. You want me to bargain against myself? I don't have an offer from the other side. You know, you won't even, you're telling me that maybe, you know, they would be at 200. I don't even know if they are, but you know, I'm not bargaining against myself.
Well, let's talk about let's have the conversation this way. I'm not asking you to give me an offer to take the other side. But I'm just simply asking you, are you willing to negotiate something between 900 and 200,000?
If I knew they were willing.
Okay. So you are willing to negotiate?
Yeah.
But what you're looking for is some movement from them?
Right.
All right.
So again, the hypothetical, if you knew, because what you want to create for them is certainty. If you knew, let's assume at this point, you've got them at 650 and 500, and it's 3 o'clock.
Plenty of time.
And you've already done cost of defense, and you know
You've done best day, worst day.
you know there's at least a $75,000 cost that they're going to come out of in this case. Steve, you're at 500. Chris is at 650. If you knew for certain that he would move somewhere here, would you come off the 500?
Well, Tracy, all I did, I came here with 500,000 in authority. And, I'm really, I would make a call, but I'm really reluctant to make that call unless I have a good number specific number, because I can't call twice.
Okay. Where, I know that 500, I hear you tell me that's your point. What number are you thinking you're gonna call for? Because really, Steve, aren't we here, aren't we at 575 and 575? 650 minus 75 and 500 plus 75.
Tracy, I've seen this before. We're not gonna split it. We're not gonna do a split down the middle. If we're gonna settle this thing, I'm gonna use your chart. It's gotta be more here. It can't be here in the middle. So
what is
if you
here?
could
Tell
get
me
me,
what here is.
well, I don't know. I mean, you know, if, I just know it's gotta be less than 75. You know, I'm
Okay,
not
so
gonna
it's
throw
gotta
it
be
out.
less than 575.
Yeah, you know, it has to be something less than that. I'm not telling you what, and it's gotta be, 550, and I'm really reluctant to go there, and frankly, if you can't do that, don't come back.
Let me ask you something, Steve. If you knew that Chris would take 555, would you make that
Of
call?
course, $5,000, are you kidding?
Just finding the hypothetical.
I guess the answer to this question is really implicit in your example, but with the backdrop of shuttling and under many models being in disfavor, doesn't this particular end game facet lend itself to that? Because what you just portrayed, it seems to me, is really a shuttle, and frequently you'll have the client say, well, I need to talk to my attorney, and unless you're doing the shuttle thing, you know, how does that happen? So what would be your position on the appropriateness of shuttling in this circumstance when you've been through the process and you're at this point?
What happens often at this point, I'd be interested in hearing Steve's response. When you get into this dialogue that we're having here, adrenaline starts moving in the hearts of the lawyers and the clients. It's like the horse seeing the side of the barn. You're thinking, oh man, this might actually work. And so I probably would keep them apart because they've got this inertia going, and I can run back and forth with excitement and energy, enthusiasm, and keep it going.
And they want you to. They don't want to, they're willing to make the jump. They're really willing to go someplace, but they don't want to go back into the room with the other people. They're so close, they don't want to risk it.
Because they're afraid if they do.
And they're, by now, I'm really trusting Tracy. Look what she's done. You know, she's gone from 1 million at zero to basically 500 and 650. And at the start of the day, I told her, Tracy, if you can settle this case, you're a magician. I don't know, I'm not coming here with very many expectations.
At the start of the day, he told me he was at 200. You want to follow?
Yeah, so what if they say to, you know, when you're using this technique of, if I told you that they were willing to move to, you know, or if you had a guarantee that they would move to at least 500, what if they say, do you have a guarantee?
I'd say, no. No, I don't.
I just need to know.
And then how do you deal with that?
I'd go and try and get it.
And then the reverse is.
Through the other side. Let's assume Steve says to me, if I knew they'd settle for 500, I'd recommend that to my client. So now Steve comes into me and I'm Chris the plaintiff's lawyer.
Okay, I've had some very fruitful discussions with the other folks. You know, they, as you, have been very tough negotiators. But frankly, if you look where you started at the beginning of the day and you look where you are now, it's been significant. And from a mediator standpoint, there's been tremendous progress. We're really getting quite close. I know that everybody has worked very hard on this. I have the impression that the other side still is very interested in settling. They haven't left the room. They're still here. So to me, that means that there might be something more. I can't tell you what that is. I don't know for sure. In fact, I'm not sure at all. But the question I want to ask you, because you're still here too, what would it take from your side? If I could get them to go to another number, what would you be willing to accept?
Well, Steve, we're at 650. They're at 550 or 450.
And if I could
They're at
guarantee.
450. I'm not splitting this.
If tell me a number, and if I could guarantee to you that I could get that number.
You want a closing number, or you just want a
No,
number to move?
I just
move
want,
off of?
I want a number that you're willing to go with right now. I don't know what the future, but we can do something
I mean,
right
just
now.
a move, you wanna move? Well, they're at 475 and we're at 650. If I knew they would move to 500, we'd probably go to 600.
So, let's look at our chart, Trace. If they then put an offer on the table of 500,
500, yeah,
then you would be prepared to move to 600.
right.
Okay. Now, we switch it around. Tracy's now the mediator. She's come back to me, and she knows this. And both sides are willing to do this.
And you're the defendant?
Yeah.
Okay, Steve, I'm happy to tell you that there's some good thinking going on in the other room and some good progress. And where we find ourselves is poker game. And you both want to play a card, and neither one of you will play it first. You're both willing to make some substantial moves, but neither one of you want to do it without information from the other. How do you think we ought to do that?
Well, if you could tell me, I told you what I was willing to go to, but I had to see a significant move from them. And if you told me that you got the number from them that we were talking about, then I would give you authority. Then I would want to, then we could move forward, but it's got to be kind of a simultaneous thing.
Right.
I
So-
can't put it, I'm not going to put it on the table until I know what they're going to do.
So you're telling me that if you knew they had come off the 650, I could tell them you were at 500?
Well, I need to know the number that they're going to go to before I move to my 500.
Okay? What if they go to 625?
Well, you're really pushing me on this, aren't you? If you guarantee, and I'm not saying I got much more beyond that, and I'm really running out of steam here. If they go to that number, and I go to 525, I got a little bit more, but not much more.
All right, so if they go to 625, I have permission to tell them you'll go to 500?
Yes. But I also
Now-
want you to tell them that I'm running out of steam.
Okay, notice, I didn't ask him 600. I asked him 625. I already know they're at 600. So now I'm gonna go back in the other room and say, look, I have authority to tell you a new number if you're willing to drop down to something less than 650. And my authority is that if you're willing to go to 625, they'll put another number on the table. And I already know that they're at 600. And he's gonna say, well, we're at 600. Okay, and this is a choice point that I as a mediator have to make. My choice point is, do I go in and tell the plaintiff's lawyer, look, they're at 500 because they know you're willing to pay something less than 650? Or do I gamble and play some more to create some more movement so that, because I haven't closed it yet. Where I am as a mediator is the defendant thinks that he's at 500 and 625. The plaintiff thinks they're at 600 and 500. So I haven't closed the gap. So I've got to create some opportunity to have some more movement. I got to have this conversation again with new numbers. Because at that point, the inertia, the success that they've had to get here is going to close that gap.
And part of her risk as a mediator might be seeing these two right here, simply going into the other side. And you know, this is an atmospheric thing. This is just a kind of a gut thing. Going to the other side and say, look, if I could guarantee that I could get you 500,000 without changing, you haven't moved yet from your 600 to 5 or from your 6 1/4 to 5, but if I could guarantee to you that the case would settle for 500,000, would you take that?
I take 525.
Just-
No.
just
Oh, yeah,
say-
okay, yeah.
So I've got the commitment from one side, I go to the other side. Without telling them that I've gotten the commitment, I'd say, if I could settle this case for you guaranteed for $500,000, I haven't gotten that offer from the other side. So I can't tell you that it's in any way guaranteed, but if you told me that you were willing to pay 500 and I got the commitment from them without telling you that you're willing to do that, would that settle the case?
If you're telling me 500 settle the case, we'd settle for 500.
See, what I want to do, Tracy, is I want to preserve your negotiating position. But I also want to see if I can't expedite this thing a little bit. So I'm not going to tell either side about what movement they're willing to make unless I have agreement from both sides, and I know what that number is.
If you can sell it for 500, I'll recommend it. So again, you have to decide what information as a mediator you're gonna share. Even if they give you permission to share the whole thing, you might not. You might hold it back because maybe maybe the gap's too big at this point, and you've gotta go one more round to get them closer. So it's judgment calls, it's those micro choices, those choice points as mediators that you make. And the way you decided today might be different than the way you decided tomorrow. Yes.
Can I ask a slightly different question than what we're
Sure.
discussing? But on that graph that you have
Okay.
up there. Okay. So, well, this is a slightly different name. It's a hypothetical question. I'd like to ask you to put yourself in the position of the chief legal counsel of some of the largest insurance companies we have, or corporations like General Electric. And looking at what you just did, what's wrong with the following, and I want to talk about cases like employment cases, medical malpractice, P&I, medical insurance, that sort of thing.
All at the
where
same
you have
time.
highly repetitive situations going on. So, and so if I'm the chief legal counsel, what's wrong with this argument that I'm about to do? I look at
Which
this and
who are you?
I'm the chief legal counsel of
For
the world's
the
biggest
company.
insurance
For
company.
the company,
that
okay, so
does
you're in
all.
defense. Presumably you're the defense. You're chief legal counsel.
I gotta sit down to listen.
And I'm looking at this and I'm saying, if you want to play the Lone Ranger, it's a very interesting approach. The truth of the matter is that these are highly repetitive situations. There isn't anybody in the world in a highly repetitive situation like this that can actually make that statistical analysis. It's not actually possible. The only way to do it is stick it on a computer and then tell the lawyer what to do with very strict bounds based on what the computer said. You need a model of this. You can't go at it on an individual
I'm
case by
talking
case
about a
basis.
stream of cases, all the same cases, either like a class action or a failed class
No,
action.
let's say it's-
Or identical cases, 400 that have been filed, all the same thing, and you're gonna be working settlements one after another, after another, after another.
It's
No.
Same
that
counsel.
I'm the insurance company, and I know that there's a closed set of lawyers handling PI
Okay.
cases in Chicago.
Okay.
And I know that you know how we negotiate. And I know you do that on an individual item every day, over and over again, over here in Cook County Court System. And I'm thinking, there's no way that the individual lawyers that represent us, the insurance company, can figure this out in the presence of the mediator on the other side. I need a computer program, I need a modeling system of how this works so I can minimize my cost over time.
You mean a computer program that minimizes the reserves you have to set aside for paying damage claims?
No, that of course you need.
I mean, by the way, the insurance companies all have it. It's a program they all use, and I can't think of the name of it.
Leviathan or Gargantua or
Or
something.
something like that. It's some program where they all use it, and they risk assess their case and they put a number in. That's where their numbers come from. So don't kid yourself, there's a methodology behind the numbers they use.
Well, maybe you're saying that they're already doing what I'm saying.
Yeah, they are. Steve Franco yesterday, all these John Deere cases, he comes into a mediation, he has a notebook. And he says, for every 5-year-old who got run over by a lawnmower, this is the range of numbers we had.
Okay.
For every father who got his hand stuck in the snow blower and cut his fingers off, this is what and he has that statistical analysis, and that forms the framework for the way he negotiates.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Could you address the floodgate situation in the builder in that particular scenario?
Okay. You want me to be here or the?
You
Steve,
up to it?
yeah, okay. Steve, I understand that one of your concerns in this case that came to mind is it sent a message to other homeowners about that maybe you might be a suspect. Am I reading you right?
You are. We're business people, you can't afford to make decisions that are going to give us more liability.
And we've got some numbers here, and we've talked about some risk. I mean, you know that the case could go bad. Is confidentiality in the settlement of concern to you? Would that help you?
Oh, we definitely don't want, if we were to settle this case, and I'll tell you that the cases we have settled, we've insisted on a confidentiality.
So if we have a confidentiality agreement, and assuming Mrs. Jones honors it, what's the concern?
What's the what?
What's the concern?
It may stop right there.
What,
It may
if
stop-
you
it may
know
stop
that it
right
isn't
there.
gonna get out to the public, And sometimes what they'll build in is a penalty provision. You know, you have to mediate that. So that's one way to address floodgates. If you've got the confidentiality, the process of confidentiality of the resolution, you can you can stop the knowledge from being public. And there's value, by the way, in that. And you can use that as a technique to leverage more money. You could go into the plaintiff, you know, go back to the defendant and say, look, the plaintiff really wants to settle this case, and they heard about confidentiality, and you know, they weren't too happy about that, but, you know, if you wanted to change your offer and I could get confidentiality, maybe that might close the gap. So you can use that as a tool to get that. 2 more questions, and I gotta go catch a plane.
What about, but how do you work that in the context of an employment case where you've got the same pattern of cases and the employer understands the risk loss stuff, his lawyer is very familiar with it, but the confidentiality clauses have little or no value because they can't enforce them. So how do you deal with that kind of issue?
A couple different things. One of the things that sometimes when you're looking at that particular problem, you have to pull the employer back away from the conflict and say, what's the future going to look like in your company with this massive stuff behind you? And how are we, you know, where are we going to go? What did you learn, what did you learn from this lesson, be a little bit parental, to pull them away from it so that they see the value in moving behind it and moving forward. And whether they pay $5,000 more or $10,000 more in the grand scheme of things of all of the cases is not going to be what prevents this case from settling.
And what is the risk of going to trial and losing with the dramatic publicity that's going to occur versus settling the case with the possibility that there'll be other cases coming along, but they'll be more defensible, and they've got tough lawyers, and they will defend those.
So you've got
They will try
confidentiality
those.
and publicity that work for you, plus the idea of let's look at the future. I sense it doesn't answer the question.
No, not really, because what the particular issue I'm trying to deal with is, or I'm trying to ask about is where they understand all that, they know about the risk, they know about the publicity, but what they're concerned about is a series of spin-off. I want one of those. You mediated with him, I know he got $500 or $1,000 or whatever, I want one of those too. Now they got 4 or 5 involved instead of.
That's their suspicion now. They
The
don't.
practical answer, I'm sorry, what?
I'm sorry. Your hypothetical is, I don't want to set a precedent, that's the term.
Right.
Yeah,
But the
Not that it's happened yet.
Well, it
It's the
has.
fear of.
Yeah.
No, but in this particular example I'm thinking of, it has.
The practical reality of it is if you have a sense of stream of cases, they're going to self-design a system where that doesn't present itself. Where I saw him get 5, so I want 5. The lawyers are going to, and mediators or conflict resolvers are, because that's a real common problem. And so you're going to hit it first before you get into the system of how you do it.
Another way of addressing it is to go through things about what other types of problems do they have on a repetitive basis that result in legal action, and how do they address those? And how is this different from the fact that they have a repetitive breach of contract cases time after time? And do you settle those cases? Yes, we do. And has that resulted in more people bringing litigation against you because you settled that particular case? Well, not really, because our lawyers are known to litigate.
No, now I understand. No, that answered my question.
One other question was over.
Just
Yes, sir.
a quick one. You all started an example and you didn't finish it where you assigned a 55% value to $26,000. You didn't complete that.
Oh, I'm gonna apologize. I have to catch a plane, and so I'm gonna let Steve answer that question and close up for you. We have really enjoyed sharing with you today. We hope to come back, and we hope that we've given you some food for thought. You've given us much food for thought, and I'm gonna let Steve answer that gladly. Goodbye, dear.
Thanks all.
And Stephanie and Susan, thank you.
Stephanie, she got this from Italy.
Perfect. I actually got a couple like that.
I'm sorry, but
You were great. Thank you so much.
if you need
Thank
us,
you,
call
Tracy.
us. My rule when I teach is, If you need something, call, email, whatever you need. We're happy to answer questions. Just identify yourself as having been part of this program in your headline, otherwise we delete and click. So, but feel free to
Thank you,
call
Tracy.
anytime. Thanks, okay. Bye, all.
One complaint I have, which is a complaint usually Tracy and I assist on would be teaching, and that was we want clean erasers and we want fresh markers after every session. So you remember.
Stephanie.
Okay,
Hey,
so
you
the
got
question-
fresh markers, actually.
I don't have to catch the plane, so if you want to continue a little bit, either as an entire group or small, I can do that a little bit longer. The question was, finish the example about 55%.
Right.
All right. So maybe I'll try to role play this with someone else, or maybe I'll just kind of do it the way it works. What you've done is, where does the 55% come out? Well, first of all, you started on one of these kind of best day, worst day things. So here's your best day. Here's a better day. Here's a good day. Then you start going downhill, which is a bad day, a terrible day, worst day. Now, there are a lot of columns here, but you'll see what happens because you eventually, it's kind of like shrinking the brackets with